Fox News contributor, Joe diGenova, former prosecutor himself, diGenova and Tunsing, and David Schoen, civil rights and criminal defense attorney. Let me start with you, Joe diGenova. You know, from my reading of this, I've always understood that if there's an FEC violation of any kind or an in-kind contribution, that's like a slap on the wrist and a fine, not raiding your offices in your home.
Well, if this is a Federal Election Commission violation that led to the search of Michael Cohen's office in New York today by the Southern District of New York, that would be the appropriate place for, obviously, the search to be executed. And if there are records related to payments which might be part of an FEC investigation by the Southern District, that would also be the appropriate place for it to occur. Right now, we just don't know anything other than there was a search, but it's clearly related to something involving Mr. Cohen's activities on behalf of certain individuals, whoever they might be. So we just have to wait and see what is.
Would this be a normal practice for such a case like that?
No, I think normally what you would do is issue a subpoena for records. You would not execute a search warrant at a lawyer's office. But this is not the first time that Justice Department lawyers have used both, have forced lawyers to waive the attorney-client privilege, as they did in the Manafort case, and apparently executed a search warrant here for the president's personal lawyer. So it remains to be seen what it's about. I mean, the most likely subject would be the Federal Election Commission.
Would at some point communications between his personal lawyer and the president, is that privileged?
Oh, yes, of course. Those are privileged, but you can get...
But the president doesn't email anyway, to be honest. It would only be emails about the president.
Yeah, there may be memorandums, however, of conversations. Those are privileged. And in order to get those, the lawyer, the prosecutor has to state that there is a legal reason that the attorney-client privilege would not apply in this case. And so we wouldn't know what that is because that would only be in the affidavit in support of the search warrant.
What would you make of this, David Cohen, from a legal standpoint? Then we'll bring in Sarah Carter.
I mean, on the face of it, it sounds outrageous. First of all, you know, in these kinds of things, there are special regulations that apply for the search and seizure of any documents and computer records from an attorney's office because of the privilege issue. And the U.S. Attorney's Office would be required to put a taint team, T-A-I-N-T, taint team in place right away to make sure that whoever the prosecutors in the case are not exposed to attorney-client privileged communications. But let's start from the beginning with this thing. Special counsel referral of something this far afield, clearly this far afield from the special counsel's task. Special counsel doesn't have the authority to go outside then without consulting with Mr. Rosenstein in this case, to go outside then and start another unrelated prosecution on his referral. He was appointed with a specific mandate and task in this case. That's the thing I need to learn the most about, I think, and it's the most troubling on the face of it.
On the face of it, doesn't it seem then like a fishing expedition? For example, if you remember, there were charges that Michael Cohen was in Russia, and then he released his passport, and he'd never been to Russia.
Right, and once these innuendos and allegations, you know, are made public like this, it's as if the truth is forgotten, at least for a while, except, you know, I've said this before, quite frankly, except for shows like yours, and maybe only yours, that continues to dig into this kind of thing and ask the questions and demands answers.
Yeah. Sarah Carter, on the face of this, I'm not sure what to make of it, but the idea that perhaps this was recommended by Robert Mueller's office and that it was the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York executing the series of search warrants. And apparently, I guess it seems to be, you know, Stormy Daniels related. I always thought a case like that would be, in other words, if it's an in-kind donation of some kind. And I do remember Michael saying it publicly and saying it to me at the time, that, in fact, he never told the president about this, that it was something that he had, you know, a pretty wide discretion on his own to handle matters without bringing it to his attention. And it might seem unusual for most people, but if you're a billionaire, I guess it's not.
Yeah. I guess it's not. I think one of the bigger questions here is the sense of mission creep by the special, counsel, by Robert Mueller, and these tactics. Listening to both Joe diGenova and David Schoen talk about this, there's a real sense of concern here about how far they're willing to go, what they're willing to do, and what type of documents they're willing to collect. Remember, I mean, there's attorney-client privilege documents that you would think would be protected, and now you're saying to yourself, well, maybe these aren't being protected. The story, Mattapuzo's story, focuses a lot on Stormy Daniels. I'm sure the FEC is also a part of this. But what other documents are they seizing while they're going in here? Tax documents, business records, all kinds of information. And you were right from the very beginning. I mean, Cohen was being accused in the dossier, the former British spy, Christopher Steele's dossier, of being in Europe until he turned over his passport and said, look, I've never been there. Let me show you what I got. And he was, forthright, apparently, with them about the $130,000 payment. Who knows what they're, going to find now. I mean, I'm not saying I know what they're going to discover, but he was very open when he was questioned about that. And look at what happened to Manafort. I mean, they just basically stormed in his house at 5 a.m. This appears to be another move by the special counsel to garner attention, to shift back over to them, to continue this mission creep, to find whatever they need to find on the president or on anyone else associated with the president, and really, for the last 15 months, have held this administration hostage.
The one thing I think that I agree with Sarah wholeheartedly on with Joe is the idea of mission creep, but more importantly, this opens up an area where it seems that there's no limit at all into the fishing expedition that Mueller is now engaged in. And if he has access to everything that his personal attorney has, I can only imagine where that's going to lead.
Well, apparently there is no limit. And, of course, this referral probably was authorized by the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. And so there we have it. The investigation has now expanded to New York, has nothing to do with so-called Russian collusion, and now is involved with apparently FEC and other matters being handled by the Southern District of New York. It is a remarkable testament to the danger of appointing special counsels, how they will go far afield. And even though Mr. Mueller is not technically responsible for this case, he has created this case on his own by referring it to the Southern District with the approval of Mr. Rosenstein. So there you have it. And
by the way, this is the same Rod Rosenstein that is not turning over documents, slow-walking documents, over to oversight and congressional committees and the Intel Committee and the Judiciary Committees and all the other committees that are trying to look into it. They offered, a measly 3,600 documents today when 1.2 million have been requested.
Yeah, Rosenstein and Wray's performance in this has been absolutely outrageous, and it certainly leads one to believe that they are clearly slow-walking the production of documents, and I would say an embarrassing performance by the department. And to appoint this U.S. attorney from Illinois to serve as an interlocutor with the House of Representatives is a joke. You don't need an interlocutor. Adding one person isn't going to produce a single document. The House has a right to these documents, and my view is very simple. They should hold Rosenstein and Wray in contempt.
Well, that's what Mark Meadows was talking about. David, you were going to add?
I just want to say, we've lost track of Article 2 of the Constitution here. It appears that the Department of Justice, without sounding like Chicken Little, is in a state of chaos here. What kind of management is going on when we have a special counsel running roughshod over everything, supposedly under the authority of Mr. Rosenstein? We have to bring in an outside U.S. attorney to oversee document production. We have to bring in an outside U.S. attorney, also Mr. Huber from Utah, for the other investigative work. I don't understand what's going on. I know everyone's worried about the PR fallout from the president taking charge of, managing the Justice Department, and I'm sensitive to that, I suppose. On the other hand, that's what Article 2 is for. It vests in the executive the right to run these executive agencies in the country's best interests.
All right, we're going to take a break. More with Sarah Carter and David Schoen and Joe diGenova. All right, as we roll along, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. We have David Schoen and Joe DeGeneva and Sarah Carter with us. And the FBI raided the office of Michael Cohen, the attorney, apparently the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, doing it at the behest, in some way, or recommendation of Robert Mueller. Seems to be related to Stormy Daniels. You know, we keep talking about overreach and exceeding one's mandate in all of this. Do you suspect here, Sarah, that the special counsel is looking for cover, knowing it's beyond his mandate, and just recommending it to the Southern District?
Yeah, I suspect that's the case. I mean, I'm not an attorney here, and I think that, David Schoen or Joe DeGeneva would be able to answer that probably more directly. But there's a lot of issues here that don't quite pass the smell test, right? I mean, we see that they're expanding this investigation. We saw that with Robert Mueller. I've talked to sources who've said, look, this is a legacy issue for Mueller. He's going to want to find something. He's going to want to find something on anybody, which is why we saw, the guilty plea, one count of lying, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos. We see him going after Manafort and Rick Gates, all of which, remember, the beginning of this special counsel, this was supposed to be the foundation of alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. But there was no evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, it was based on faulty analysis by a former British spy, a foreigner, who put together a dossier that he himself didn't even verify. So on its face, the special counsel, the appointment of the special counsel by Rosenstein, was wrong. I mean, if you're looking at the legality of it all, and I'm sure they can explain even better, the attorneys, but on the face of it, it was wrong. So now they're reaching out, and you got this mission creep, and they're looking for anything and everything, and they're, stretching these tentacles far and wide. Well, go back to the original mandate. What was it they were supposed to look for? They were supposed to look for collusion, and nobody so far has found any evidence of that whatsoever. Instead, the presidency for the last 15 months has been held hostage.
We got to take a break only because of the constraints of time. Joe DeGeneva, David Schoen, Sarah Carter, Ed Henry will give us a quick hit from Washington when we get back. We'll also take a couple of calls for these guys when we get back. The thing I think that's most disturbing, okay, so if they're going to raid the office of Michael Cohen, but yet we knew about really very specific crimes that Hillary committed that was serious, because we know 5 foreign intel services got a hold of top secret classified special access program information. We know about the dossier bought and paid for, and we know about the lies to a FISA judge. All these big issues, and nothing ever happens. But Stormy Daniels, we're going to get to the bottom of in about 10 seconds. We'll raid an office if we need to. Something stinks to high heaven in all of this.
Draining the swamp, one corrupt politician at a time. This is the Sean Hannity Show.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour. Toll-free telephone number is 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Anyway, so the FBI Monday raiding the office of the president's longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, seizing records, and federal prosecutors in New York. And actually, the announcement was today the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York executed a series of search warrants, seized the privileged communications between my client, Michael Cohen, and his client, said Stephen Ryan, that's the president's attorney, revealing that to the New York Times. I have been advised by federal prosecutors that the New York action is, in part, a referral by the Office of the Special Counsel Robert Mueller. And then it goes on to talk about how, the payment to Stormy Daniels, which would at best be an in-kind donation, FEC issue of some kind, hardly kind of go to jail stuff. This is like a fine and see you later and I'm sorry. We continue with Joe DeGeneva and Tunsing, former prosecutor himself, Sarah Carter, Fox News contributor, investigative reporter, David Schoen, civil rights criminal defense attorney. First, we get a full report from Ed Henry for the Fox News Channel, our Washington bureau chief. How are you?
Good to see you, Sean.
Never ends. In terms of this, it seems to come out of the blue, and it just shows, I think, that people like myself that have been warning that Mueller's on a witch hunt and there's no stopping him, and all these indications he's throwing out there that he wants this to end is a crock.
Well, Sean, I have a source familiar with the investigation telling me that that story is true, that it was not just Michael Cohen's office in New York that was raided, but his personal apartment as well. The FBI looking for records, as you mentioned, so I can confirm that, number one. Number two, I mean, as a reporter, I won't call it a witch hunt, as you know, but what I would say is that I think that what this is pointing to is something that you and others have said many, many times, going back to the beginning of the Mueller investigation, which is, look, it started out as an investigation of alleged collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. And a lot of people were warning a year ago or longer that this was going to morph into something else. And the fact that you now have this story in which sources are telling us that it was a referral from Robert Mueller's office, the special counsel, who, again, is supposed to be investigating collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign, that now might be referring something about Stormy Daniels and the payment or other matters that we don't know yet all of the facts, I think is going to raise a lot of eyebrows about where this investigation is headed.
Stay right there, Ed Henry. Let me bring in attorney David Schoen, who's still with us. David, from my standpoint, if I'm on the president's defense team at this point, I'm looking at this and saying, all right, this has now become such a stretch too far, so far from an original mandate, that now this is just outright intimidation. And it seems that Mueller's intentions are to go wherever he can possibly go because he never found Trump-Russia collusion. Let's take him down any way we can. And that tells me that whatever strategy maybe the president and his team had about cooperating with Mueller should be thrown out the window, and they shouldn't cooperate at all at this point.
I've agreed with that before for a long time. I don't know how you can cooperate with someone when you know that the agenda is simply to find a way to get you, whether that's through an interview, false statement claim, or some other way. We're seeing now the criminalization of a purely civil matter. I don't know. It seems like maybe the mandate has become adding to the list of reasons Hillary Clinton lost the election. So now maybe the real reason we're going to find out from this search is that she lost the election because Stormy Daniels didn't speak out about Donald Trump's affair. We're looking for the Russian collusion. We're looking for all these other reasons. The country wants to get on about its business. So cooperating with Mr. Mueller won't lead down that road.
Sarah Carter, I am beginning to think that everything that I believed about Mueller and that we've revealed about the team that he's put together, and this goes to the comments that Alan Dershowitz made over the weekend, which I think were dead on accurate. And I think actually applicable, and especially in light of everything here, and even the Freedom Caucus member Mark Meadows saying that he might have to impeach Rod Rosenstein in all of this. But at the end of the day, we now have a prosecutor that just seems that he's on a never-ending witch hunt and will go any place and anywhere. You know, Matt Drudge just actually tweeted this out, and I think it's applicable here. Starr investigation began as billing records, ended with semen on a dress, cigar sex, lying under oath. Mueller began as Russia collusion, ended with question mark.
I was thinking the same thing. I didn't even know Drudge had posted that, but it really goes well with what's happening right now. Look, let's just go back to the weekend when Representative Mark Meadows came out, and I had spoken with him on Saturday. Then he went on Fox News' Judge Jeanine's show, and he talked to her about, this holding in contempt Rod Rosenstein, and if they don't cooperate, they're going to find some way to get him removed. I mean, they're just so angry and frustrated in Congress because they're not getting the documents that they requested. Remember, Rosenstein's deadline, the DOJ's deadline, had passed. It was Thursday. They were supposed to turn over the documents. And then it wasn't until Sunday night when the DOJ decided, okay, we're gonna get this U.S. attorney. John Lausch, we're gonna put him on board from Chicago, and then he's gonna go ahead and review all these documents. I mean, this is really becoming such a burden on everyone. These documents, including not just the electronic communications, which were the beginning of the FBI's investigation, but also Carter Page's FISA applications, that even the FISA court itself, the FISC court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, says we have no problem with Congress looking at these documents. And there's 1.2 million documents, which they've already obtained, which the DOJ IG already has, but now we have to have another prosecutor go through this. I think we were balancing it out, trying to say, okay, DOJ is trying to do the right thing here. They're bringing in other people, but now they're bringing in another another U.S. attorney to do a job of documents which they already have. I mean, there is something here that is not quite right, and that's what all these sources are saying. And I think Americans, I'm seeing, my Twitter account just explode with people's comments. They're frustrated. They're angry. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what the Department of Justice is doing. They're obviously withholding information. I want to know what all those documents say now.
I want to know as well, Ed Henry, on top of all of this, I mean, we have a lot of other breaking news that the president now should make a decision in less than 48 hours about what he's going to do with the gas attack on innocent men, women, and children in Syria. That could even be in the works as we speak. North Korea actually has acknowledged that they're willing to talk about denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. All of that happening, and this overshadows. Stormy Daniels is back.
Yeah, I can tell you that from talking to some of the president's senior aides inside the White House, they've been telling me for months that one of the president's biggest concerns about all these investigations, he believes he's innocent. He's not concerned about how it's going to end in terms of innocence or guilt. He's concerned about it overshadowing his ability to conduct his job as commander-in-chief, that around the world this is weakening him. Despite that, I would say, as you noted, he's gotten North Korea to the table. The president announced today that this, quote-unquote summit with Kim Jong-un is going to happen in May or June. And so despite all the talk months ago that the president's rhetoric was way off the mark, he's gotten Kim Jong-un to the table. We'll see where that goes. Syria is a very tense, difficult situation, but I certainly think based on our reporting and what we're hearing and based on experience, the fact that about a year ago when a chemical attack like this happened, the president didn't waste really any time in moving forward with U.S. airstrikes. So I think the fact that the president said today he's going to decide in the next 24 to 48 hours is a clear indication, as well as the fact that Defense Secretary James Mattis said that nothing's off the table and he can't rule out U.S. military action.
Yeah,
we can't
absolutely.
Say
And the fact that he mentioned Vladimir Putin for the first time, and it was in his Twitter account, and he mentioned and called him out on that, and Iran, as well as the others, I think is a real indication that the president is going to take some type of action in Syria, and necessary action. We just saw with the UN, with the United Nations, and Nikki Haley speaking before the UN about the atrocities going on there. So certainly something's going to happen on
What
that
are the
side.
options, David, shown for the president at this particular point in time now that this mandate is just been shattered again by Mueller and his team? I mean, the president doesn't email. The only thing Michael Cohen might have are personal, private notes or cases that he worked on for the president, likely even before he ever ran or became president. Obviously, if this is now what it's become, a Stormy Daniels issue, I've got to imagine that the president and his legal team are going to rethink the whole thing.
Right. So two things. I mean, based on what you just said, which is absolutely accurate, Michael Cohen was the president's personal lawyer. Everyone out there should know that if Michael Cohen made a deal to pay money to Stormy Daniels to protect his client's reputation, maybe his client's marriage, that's a contract. That's a civil matter that they decided. The wisdom of it is beyond me. I don't know Michael Cohen from Adam's house cat. I don't know if I would have made the deal.
Well, I could tell you with my own interactions, and something that I can confirm that he told me privately, that he had said publicly, is that he never told the president. He told me from the get-go that was the case. Does that impact anything here?
Yes, it does, of course, because it's preposterous to think that Michael Cohen thought if Stormy Daniels speaks out about that affair, that's going to turn the election. That's election collusion. He paid her money to affect the election. That's preposterous to me, at least. But it is.
Well, as his personal lawyer, would it be so unusual for somebody to have the authority for a billionaire to take care of what is basically for a billionaire a nonsense suit or a nonsense issue? To them.
Happens all the time, every day of the week. Back to your question about what are the president's options. I mean, again, we've said this from the start. Neil Katyal, who wrote the regulations for the special counsel, has written an article making it clear the president under Article 2 retains the authority over the situation. Again, everyone's worried about the PR and the fallback. I understand that. But maybe the president needs to start with Rod Rosenstein and then move on. The president ultimately has the authority built into the regulations.
Right, but here's my big question.
The Clinton administration drew up for the
How is it possible that we know Hillary, to avoid congressional oversight, we know she put top secret, special access programming, classified information on a server. We know that it was hacked by at least 5 foreign service intelligence agencies. We know that she deleted 33,000 emails. We know that she acid washed her hard drive. We know that she beat up her devices. Those are all crimes. That's obstruction. That's 18 U.S.C. 793. We know that Comey and Strzok and Page and others put the fix-in the investigation. Then we go to the dossier. We know that they wouldn't tell us, but for a year we finally find out that Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC that she was running paid for it. Then we find out a FISA court was lied to. Nothing ever moves in this direction for the most part, except for Andrew McCabe. And I'm thinking these are far bigger crimes than anything that could have been involving Stormy Daniels and a lawyer settling a case with somebody that's making an accusation, true or not true.
True, and I believe people are starting to listen to you. You're the one pushing this issue, and people are starting to wake up and listen. You're seeing others. Sarah Carter is writing article after article exposing the stuff. You're reporting it on your show. They have to start listening. These things are very, very serious. And again, I know Mr. Dershowitz and DeGenevieve have made the point about special counsel. They're right. We don't get past the threshold in the Mueller thing to appoint the special counsel, at least in comparison to these other matters. Every matter you just raised raises the specter of requiring a special counsel far beyond this one.
And then we go to our investigation of Andrew Weissman, and Andrew Weissman lost tens of thousands of jobs, overturned 9-0 in the Supreme Court. Anderson Accounting is where the jobs were lost. Then 4 Merrill executives go to jail, but turns out they're innocent. That was overturned by the Fifth Circuit. Then you've got Whitey Bulger. In that particular case, 4 innocent people go to jail because Mueller's involved in that case with the FBI informant, and they're protecting that informant. And meanwhile, 4 people go to jail, 2 die in jail, and $100+ million settlement. And I'm looking at this team, Sarah, that was put together by Mueller, and I'm saying these people don't have the best track record, and yet he's appointing the most aggressive, overly aggressive people that have, by the way, in all those cases, withheld exculpatory evidence.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, the withholding of exculpatory evidence in all those cases, even the nickname that the New York Times gave Weissman was, Mueller's pit bull. That's very apropos because that appears to be what's going on here. And, David Schoen brought up something that's so true. There is so much insurmountable evidence regarding Hillary Clinton, regarding the FBI, those that were involved in it, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, both still employed by the FBI, by the way, McCabe's involvement, FBI Barabicki is involvement in all of this. So you have all of these people with all of this evidence pouring out, and you wonder, well, where is this all going? Because it seems like they're searching for some kind of crime with the special counsel when there is so much evidence of possible crimes and real crimes being committed on the other side.
So true, and they do nothing, and nothing happens except for Andrew McCabe. But yeah, I got to let you all go, unfortunately. Sean, yeah, go ahead. Last word.
Real quick, Ed Henry here. I just wanted to say, did you ever hear of a story where Hillary Clinton's attorney had his or her office and apartment raided?
No. That's a good point.
Perfect.
That's a perfect point. Ed Henry, thank you. David Schoen, thank you. Sarah Carter.